this video, we're going to explain what this use relative references button really means when we're creating macros. So in order to do that, we need to first understand the difference between relative referencing and absolute referencing. Okay, so the best way to learn obviously is by an example, and you're probably more familiar with relative referencing. So let's go ahead and look at what an example of that means right now. So let's say I have a couple columns or a couple values here in the same column, just 1, 2, 3, 4. And then right next to it, let's say again, I just have 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? And then in column G, I want this to be a formula, and I want this to equal E2 times F2. And I will click on enter. And now I want to apply the same formula to the rest of these cells right here. So to do that very quick and easily, I'm just going to click on the cell that already has the formula inside of there, E2 times F2, okay? I'm going to click on that cell, and then I'm going to go to this little square right here in the lower right-hand corner until I get this little plus symbol here. And then once I see that plus symbol, I'm going to click and drag all the way down to the rest of the columns that I need, or the rest of the rows that I need, rather. And then we can see that the formulas automatically got applied. So right here in this one, G2, I see this cell has the formula of E2 times F2. And then in G3, I see that it automatically updated for E3 times F3. And then in cell G4, I see again it automatically updated as to E4 times F4. And then same thing with G5, it's just E5 times F5. So the reason that these formulas automatically updated is because this is what's known as relative referencing. I said I wanted this formula to be E2 times F2. But what that really said is I have this cell right here, and then in relative position to this cell, I want to multiply it by the cell that is one position over to the right. All right, so take this cell, multiply it by one position to the right, and paste that and apply that formula to right here, to this cell here. So then when I copy this formula all the way down, it said, okay, well now he has this cell here, and he wants to multiply this cell times one cell to the right, which is right here. And then he wants this cell times one cell to the right, which is here, and so on and so forth. And that's because this is relative referencing. Now you might have seen different formulas where there's like a couple money signs inside of here. Like for instance, let's say that this was, instead of just F2, it was money F, money 2. And I will click on enter. And now if I copy and paste the same formula down here, well now this is using absolute referencing. I'm saying I don't want you to automatically update this cell here. I want this to be the absolute reference to the cell F2. And I don't want it to be the relative position of cell E2 here. Okay, so I want this absolute cell of F2, and that's why we see here then, this is 1 times 1 equals 1, and then 2 times 1 equals 2. To make it a little more clear, I will delete these and see that it has absolutely no effect on the formula here. We saw that E got updated, the E column got updated, and then down here, again, the E column got updated for E4 now. And again, right here, the E column got updated for E5, but we'll notice that the absolute reference is still pointing to the absolute cell of F2. And then just like here, this is still the absolute cell of F2, so on and so forth. So that's sort of the difference between what relative references mean versus absolute referencing. So now why is this important when we're talking about macros? If you were following me along in the last video, we created this report title macro using relative referencing. So let's go ahead and create a brand new macro, and we'll make it so it's not using relative referencing. So I'm going to uncheck the use relative referencing button. And again, I want to now, before you record any macro, you want to make sure that your cursor you have highlighted the cell that you want to start formatting in. So in this case, for demonstration, I want to start formatting inside the cell of D4. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the record macro button. And I'll just say this one's going to be called report title 2. Okay, and then I'm going to leave all these options blank here, or as the default rather, and I'll explain what they all mean in the next video. I'm just going to go ahead and click OK and start recording. And I'll do some quick simple formatting here. I'm just going to say, and now I'm just going to do some quick formatting here. And now I'm just going to do some quick formatting here. I'm going to say really cool title 2. And I'm not even going to do as many as I said last time. So let's just do some very simple formatting here. Okay. And we'll make it look like this for whatever reason. All right. There. Now let's go ahead and go back to the developer tab, and we'll just click on stop recording. Now, we saw with this macro here, we could go anywhere. I could click anywhere on a cell, and I could apply this macro, and that macro will run on the cell that I clicked it on. All right, so I'll go back again, click a new cell, and click run this one again. Okay, now if I click on a different cell, and I want to try and run the macro 2 that we did, the report title 2, and run that, we'll see nothing happened. And that's because I wasn't using relative referencing, so it didn't really matter where I clicked on any given cell because I was using absolute referencing. It said what really was happening in the code that ran with the macro is it said this formatting should always apply in cell D4. All right, so if I create a brand new Excel sheet and I want to run that macro again, the report title 2 macro, it's going to automatically apply it in cell D4 again. And again, that is because I recorded this macro without the use of using relative references. Versus this one here was using relative referencing. All right, so I hope that sort of explains the difference between what relative references really means and what absolute references means. And also just a note, since by default this button is not selected, that means by default macros are recorded to, macros are by default set to record using absolute referencing. So if you want relative referencing to where you can click on any cell and then apply the macro, make sure you use the use relative references button.